Hashtag cold open. I was about to leave the man I'd spent 7 years with, and the guilt was eating me alive. But what I didn't realize yet was that guilt wasn't even mine to carry. Let me take you back to where this all started, because understanding how I got here is everything. I was 18 years old. Fresh out of high school, just turned 18, actually. And that's when I met him online. We'll call him Dave. He was 27. 9 years older than me. I thought that was so sophisticated at the time. I thought older meant more mature, more stable, more, I don't know, worthy. We started talking in February. By April, I'd moved in with him. An hour away from my parents. In a new city. In a new relationship. Everything moved at lightning speed, and honestly, I was drowning. I wasn't ready for adult life. I wasn't ready for any of it. But Dave said he'd take care of me. He said he wanted me with him. And I believed him. The first few years were chaos. We fought constantly. He was cheating. I was struggling to figure out how to be an adult in a city where I knew nobody except him. And the worst part? My parents were an hour away, but they felt like they were on another planet. Somehow, over time, that distance became permanent. Dave had convinced me to cut them off. Not explicitly, you understand, it was more subtle than that. It was just easier not to call. Easier not to visit. Eventually, they were just gone from my life. But here's where it gets interesting. Over the years, I started to grow up. I started to actually become a person. I got better at my job. My paycheck grew. I made friends. Real friends, people outside of Dave. I got my own car. I had independence. I had money of my own. And that's when everything changed. The moment I became less dependent on him, Dave changed too. He didn't want me to have that freedom anymore. He started tracking where I was going. He needed to know who I was with, down to the names and details. He'd flip, and I mean flip, from being sweet and loving one moment to absolutely hostile the next. Controlling. That's the word I was looking for. Controlling. And then, something happened. We were fighting about him trying to cheat on me again. And he lost it. Not just lost it, he completely unraveled. He claims it was a mental health break. But the reality is, it almost critically harmed both of us. And after that moment, I was scared of him. Genuinely, physically scared. That's when something clicked in my brain. This isn't love. This isn't a relationship. This is a trap, and I need to get out. So I started planning. Quietly. Carefully. I found an apartment in a new city. I lined up a new job. I had friends ready to help me move. Everything was in place. I was going to pick up my keys on Saturday and tell him tomorrow that we were done. But here's the thing, I was paralyzed by guilt. He'd been so kind lately. So sentimental. So loving. And I kept thinking about all those years together. 7 years. That's a long time. Part of me felt like I owed him some kind of explanation. Some kind of closure. Everyone online was telling me not to say anything, just leave. But how could I do that to someone I'd spent 7 years with? That felt cruel. That felt like I was taking the coward's way out. I was so caught up in my own guilt that I couldn't see the bigger picture. I posted about it online, honestly just looking for reassurance that I wasn't a terrible person. And the responses I got, they shattered something in me. In a good way. Someone pointed out something I'd never actually said out loud before: he groomed you, and isolated you from your parents when you were a teenager. Groomed. That word hung there in the air. I'd never framed it that way. But when I really thought about it, Dave met me online when I was 17. He claims he didn't know my age at first. But he didn't start texting me until after my 18th birthday. Right after. That wasn't a coincidence. That was calculated. Another commenter asked me a question that broke everything wide open: would you date an 18-year-old now at 25? And the answer was absolutely not. I'm 25 now, looking back at who I was at 18, and the gap feels enormous. I was a child. A kid trying to figure out how to be an adult. And he chose me because I was malleable. Because I could be shaped. Because he could mold me into whatever he wanted. The commenter also asked if he'd ever been violent. And yes. Yes, he had. During that incident, when he had his mental health break, it was violent. I didn't want to get into the specifics, but it was bad enough that I'd been terrified of him ever since. And then they gave me advice that shifted everything: don't sabotage this by treating him with respect and decency. That's reserved for people who are safe and stable. That hit me like a truck. I wasn't being noble by trying to give him closure. I wasn't being mature or kind. I was being manipulated by 7 years of conditioning. 7 years of being taught that my feelings don't matter as much as keeping the peace. 7 years of justifying every single action I took to a man who didn't deserve that energy. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to tell him in person. I wasn't going to sit down and have some big emotional conversation. I wasn't going to give him the chance to talk me out of it or convince me to stay or manipulate me one more time. I was going to get out while he was at work. Everything I needed was already packed, hidden, ready to go. And if I felt the need to say anything at all, it would be a text message. Not a conversation. Not a debate. Just information. Saturday came. I picked up my keys. And then came the hardest part, actually doing it. All those feelings came rushing back. The guilt. The what ifs. The voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like Dave, telling me I was being ungrateful, that I was breaking his heart, that he didn't deserve this. But I held on to what I'd learned. I was 18 and he was 27. I would never in a million years do what he did to me. I would never isolate someone that young. I would never trap them financially or emotionally or physically. I would never flip between sweet and violent. I would never violate their safety. He chose to do all of those things. And that wasn't about me. That was about who he was. So I left. I got out. And I didn't look back. The relief was immediate. It was like breathing underwater my whole life and suddenly breaking the surface. Every breath felt stolen, but it was real. It was mine. 7 years sounds like a long time to throw away. But it wasn't 7 years lost. It was 7 years I survived. 7 years I grew in spite of everything. 7 years that taught me who I needed to become to save myself. And the guilt? It faded. Because I realized it was never mine to carry.